Guten Abend, meine Damen und Herren. Sorry, I shouldn't try to say things in other languages, even if I know how to say them, because they always come out wrong. This is William, and it is here the 3rd of October 2024. We'll be going momentarily back to 1921. But as you can see, it's dark here. It's not yet 8 o'clock, but yeah, starting to get dark earlier. And so we don't have our usual problem of the sun being low on the horizon. So we've traded one issue for another, I guess. But there is an overhead light here on the covered porch. There should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they've all burned out except one, so I've got to take care of that now that it's getting dark earlier. Anyway, the reason why I started with an attempt at a German greeting is because today we find ourselves not in Copenhagen, although this part of the diary was written in Copenhagen. We find ourselves in Hamburg, so not too long after the end of the war. So this was February 1921, so things had definitely settled down. And I have a book here to show that I'm rereading. I read it years ago and I thought, well, it's a good time to reread it. Weimar Culture by Peter Gay. He was German, but he changed his name when he came to the U.S., a scholar, and it's a marvelous book. So if you want to brush up on Weimar Germany and particularly culture of that period, this is an excellent book to read. So let us dive into this and then talk about it a little bit on the other side. One can make the journey from Paris to Denmark in 2 days, but I didn't manage it because my train was late reaching Hamburg and the Copenhagen train had already departed. I had to spend a day and a night in Hamburg. At first I was annoyed by that, but then I felt some consolation because there were so many interesting things to see. I came away with so many impressions. I hadn't been in Germany since 1914, and then I was only passing through. The main thing that struck me was the complete absence of military personnel. Huge barracks stood empty, and there wasn't a single soldier anywhere nearby. The only military personnel in uniform were men wearing some kind of green uniform. That seems to be the attire of a new national army. Then, with respect to daily life, I found the complete absence of bread, sugar, and milk to be shocking. In the hotels and restaurants, the tablecloths and napkins are paper. And what is really astonishing for Germany is that in Hamburg, there's so little beer that in my hotel, they had only a bad porter. But those observations only apply to the material side of life. It was far more interesting to observe the situation with respect to mood and the political atmosphere. Portraits of the Emperor, Crown Prince, and Hindenburg could be seen everywhere. There was not a photograph, where there was not a photograph of the emperor, then there was definitely one of Hindenburg. Okay, so very interesting stuff. I knew Dmitri wasn't going to let us down. He was not either going to go to his hotel and spend the night and not make any effort to look around and see what was going on, or even just to provide us with his physical impressions of the city. He's going to be a much better guide than that. Okay, so the problem with the train, yeah, I don't know if German trains have ever had the same level of exemplary reputation that Swiss trains have, But in this instance, it didn't work out for him. I'm told by my German friends that the situation with trains in Germany at the moment is absolutely horrific because of privatization, I think. I don't know. If any of you who are watching this are German, feel free to comment. But anyway, that is an aside. So Dmitri, it sounds like, maybe narrowly misses the train that was supposed to take him on to Copenhagen, and he was understandably annoyed by that. But Dmitri being Dmitri, and this was a very positive quality that he had, I think you'll agree, he decided to have a good look around himself. And to take advantage of that time that he had there. Obviously, he was able to get a hotel room, and so he he had some time to spend. He doesn't tell us what time he arrived in Hamburg, but clearly he had some time to spend. So let's see, he's doing some underlining in this diary section of the diary. He's fond of doing underlining. So the first thing he underlines is when he writes, I had to spend a day and a night in Hamburg. He underlines that for some reason. And then he underlines this statement that there were so many interesting things to see. Okay. So, what are his impressions? Well, first he informs us, which is useful information, that he has not been to Germany since 1914, and then he was only passing through. So he spent the spring, I think some of the winter, and then the spring of 1914, doing a very abbreviated form of the Grand Tour. So he was in, where was he? He was in Paris, he was in Rome, and he was also, part of the time visiting his father, but I don't think he spent a lot of time with his father. And I don't think he had ever really spent much time in Germany, but when he was a boy, not a little boy, when he was an adolescent getting on to, around 18 years old, he would go and spend a couple weeks with his father in Tegernsee in Bavaria. So his father liked to take every year a holiday in the Hotel Steinmetz, I think, on Tegernsee, the big lake, in Bavaria. And so Dmitri was used to Germany really only through that one place. Even though so many relatives of his were German. And as you know, if you've been following along the 1906 and 1907 diary entries, when he was between 14 and 16 years old, he was studying German. He was getting formal instruction in German. And that seems to have been important in this instance, that he was able to communicate in German. So he hadn't been there since before the war, and then he'd just been passing through, probably either on his way to France or on his way back from France, or both. I thought it was going to be quiet since it's late. Oh well. So the first thing that strikes him is he's looking around and he's not really seeing anyone in uniform. He's seeing these huge, he uses the word huge, empty barracks. So I'll have to ask around with my German friends, who I have a couple friends who are natives of Hamburg. And of course they don't go all the way back to 1921. But I'll have to ask them if they know if Hamburg was a big, not just naval town, but if there were barracks there, if they have any knowledge of that. So the barracks are empty, they're not being used, and Dmitri doesn't see even a single soldier anywhere in the vicinity of the barracks. And the only military personnel he sees, the only uniform people, are wearing some kind of green uniforms that he takes to be the uniform of a new national army. So, Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time since I'm doing these on a daily basis to go back and brush up on my history of that period and see exactly what the terms of the Versailles Treaty were about German disarmament and about how many troops they could have. And Dmitri doesn't seem to be knowledgeable about that either, although at the time that the Versailles Treaty was being hammered out, he was definitely paying attention and writing about that in his diaries quite a bit. But at this point, he doesn't seem to be any more knowledgeable than I am about what the status quo in Germany was, and it surprises him that there's not more of a German military presence. So let's see, this idea of a new national army. So I should have looked up the German Freikorps, because I know that to the extent that there were soldiers who were allowed to still function, that they were members of these Freikorps, but I'm not sure. That wasn't a standing army. So the army would have been very small. So the Freikorps were maybe just, former military men who had been officers or cadets during the war. Some of them remained on, and I don't know if these were, if they organized these themselves and they were sort of outside of the government, or if they actually did have some official standing. That I don't know, but I'm assuming that that was what Dmitri was seeing, or else there was just some kind of National Guard or something. So really, any of you who want to comment on that, feel free. Sorry, I need to yell at my dog. Duke, come here. You probably couldn't hear him, but he was scratching on the door, and that was, I don't like that noise at all. Here he is. Well, there's his big nose anyway. You come here. You stay here. Okay, let's see. That distracted me a little bit, so I don't know about that. The second thing that he finds rather shocking is the complete absence of these staple foods, bread, sugar, and milk. Now, mind you, he had arrived in Paris, gone to Marseille, and then arrived in Paris in December 1918, and then later that month arrived in London, and he talks in some detail about that in his diaries. And I remember him talking about, saccharin, artificial sweetener, and about people bringing their own sugar with them when they went to restaurants, and about there being a coal shortage in London, so, you couldn't get a hot bath or anything like that. But, yeah, I think he said something about bread, but either he's forgotten about what that was like, or else it just wasn't as dire as he found it to be in Germany. Duke! Sorry, that really just, it makes this squeaking noise, and yeah, okay, sorry. So he can't, he either doesn't remember that, or it simply is worse, even 3 years or 4 years after the war, it simply is worse in Germany, and that's certainly understandable. So the tablecloths and the napkins, even in the hotels, he was probably staying at a nice hotel and going to nice restaurants, but the tablecloths and napkins were paper. And that surprises me, because it seems like paper would be more of a commodity that was harder to get a hold of than, fabric. I'm sure the hotels and the restaurants had their own stock of tablecloths and cloth napkins, and why weren't they just washing them and using them? But apparently there was a problem with that. Maybe the fabric had been requisitioned during the war, I don't know. But the thing that, I like the word that he uses, astonishing. So the thing that's really astonishing for Germany, he says, is that there's so little beer, at least in Hamburg. And so all he's able to get at his hotel is some, bad second-rate porter. So I wouldn't have liked that either, because I love German beer so much. Especially Munich beer, but all German beers I really like. And it's so frustrating for me because I live in a part of the world where there are so many great craft breweries, but the only thing they make are IPAs. And it's also a big hop growing area, so I guess that makes sense. But on the other hand, you think they would cater to people at least a little bit who don't like IPAs, and I can't stand IPAs because I'm a person who can taste bitter. If you can't taste bitter, then, I guess you love IPAs or double IPAs. But I can go to a store here that has a great beer section, and they'll have 20 different craft beers, and every single one of them will either be an IPA or a double IPA, and they'll have names like Hop Hammer. And so I would have been so disappointed if I'd been in Dmitri's position there, being in Germany and not being able to get a decent beer. That definitely would have bothered me more than the sugar and milk, although the bread part of it wouldn't have been fun. But of course, this is really sort of being too dismissive of the hardship that people were facing at that time to joke about not being able to get a good beer. So, of course, he's more interested in the mood and the political atmosphere. He doesn't here use the word psychology, but of course that was, his primary interest. We already know that. We already know how keen of an observer he is of things like that, and how fundamentally interested he is in things like that. Even beyond this whole exercise that he's doing in trying to actually collect real intelligence and real information that might be valuable to his information bureau and to the Russian monarchists in Paris. And I remember how avidly he was observing and writing about the Kapp Putsch in 1919. So the Weimar government had been established under, I think it was Ebert was the head of the government, and then there was this Kapp Putsch where I believe Berlin was actually taken, but then there was a huge general strike, and even though the right wing and the military element had succeeded and the monarchist element had succeeded in taking over Berlin, they had to leave. It did not succeed because of the general strike, and in that sense, the people genuinely did speak. Maybe not the rural people, but the urban workers, and who you couldn't do without them. Dmitri at the time was really hoping that the Kapp Putsch would succeed because, he was a monarchist, and he didn't want to see any anti-monarchist movement succeed, and he specifically didn't want to see a communist government in Germany. He was really worried about that, and so was everybody else who was anti-communist. It could have gone in that direction. So Weimar Germany was not a communist state, but people were really afraid of that. So he was definitely rooting for the right-wing element on that occasion, although I'm not so sure he would have been happy if they had actually succeeded and he had seen what that was like. And thank God, years later, when the Nazi Party took over and succeeded in Germany in 1933, he was not happy with that. He'd learned that just being a right-wing government didn't make a government a good, healthy one that he wanted to support. So that was good. But, of course, he was older at that time. But, I wonder about this observation of his. I mean, I have no reason to question it, that everywhere he went in Hamburg, and, he probably didn't go too far outside of central Hamburg, he was seeing pictures, maybe some paintings, maybe some photographs of the emperor, his heir, and von Hindenburg. So he says, yeah, everywhere. He says they could be seen everywhere. And where you didn't specifically find photos of the royal family and the emperor, you did at least find photographs of Hindenburg. Yeah, I don't think Dmitri, I don't know that he'd ever met Wilhelm II. I certainly don't think he was a fan. He was not pro-German during the war. He was not pro-German after the war. But he definitely, I recall him writing in his diaries that he did not want Wilhelm to be put on trial. And there was even some question or some rumor going around that Wilhelm would be executed. And as a monarchist, he did not want to see that happen. But I never recall him writing anything positive about Wilhelm. It was just, for someone who was a member of a royal family. And did he know at that time that Nicholas and Alexandra had already been? I don't think he knew. I don't know, but he definitely didn't want to see members of any royal family being killed. So what are we going to have next time? Well, I hope you're not too anxious to get back to Denmark or to France, because he is going to give us more detail of this, though it was brief, of this stay in Hamburg. And specifically, he's going to tell us how he personally was trying to talk to people about what their feelings were. How ordinary German people, from, taxi drivers to hotel waiters, how they felt about the situation that their country was in. So, yeah, really fascinating stuff. I admire Dmitri for that. I don't know that I would have had the guts to ask people about that. I hope so, maybe. But yeah, definitely come back for that, and I'll see you next time. Bye.